So this is the What's New in Civil 3D and InfraWorks 2022. I'm your host, Brian Tanner, Senior Civil Technical Specialist here at ATG. And for those who are tuning in with us today, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. For those who are watching the recording, I appreciate you backtracking and making sure that you tune in to some of the free webinar content that we provide here at ATG for our clients and folks that we want to improve the workflows for. A little bit about myself for those who haven't had the opportunity to join one of my webinars before, or who I haven't had the luxury of working with as a client thus far. I'm a senior civil technical specialist based out of Mishawaka, Indiana. We're right a stone throw's distance from the University of Notre Dame in Northern Indiana. Civil 3D certified professional and Autodesk certified instructor. And I come to my role here at ATG, honestly, with a considerable amount of industry experience utilizing Autodesk tools as the design and analysis resources to complete the variety of projects that you see on your screen right now. So anything that I talk about during these webinars or with my clients is with the mindset of the practical application of those tools for any of these variety of projects. And if it's something I haven't worked on, then it's typically something close enough in relationship to where we can discuss and resolve a practical use for those tools, or a creative use, maybe some unintended uses of tools to make our jobs and lives a lot easier. We are your Autodesk Platinum Partner resource that also partners with Bluebeam, Leica, Bimbox, and our friends over at CTC, who we are incredibly proud of being an exclusive United States partner of the SIM project and SIM management suite to offer our clients for tremendous workflow improvements within Civil 3D, providing training, implementation, CAD management, and production services for our clients. Now, right into the topics, the task at hand today. What is actually new in Civil 3D 2022? We are going to start out with quite a few PowerPoint slides. I apologize for that. There's just a lot of things to discuss, and the easiest way to discuss it is through some of the more practical information that's available. You could climb through dozens and dozens of pages of help documentation, or you could stick around with me for the next, maybe 10 minutes of PowerPoint discussion, where we are going to summarize what might take you a few hours of research to accomplish. First and foremost, if you're a CAD manager, if you're responsible for making decisions to deploy new releases to your team, the most critical thing to understand is versioning and compatibility. Within Civil 3D 2022, we have drawing format and compatibility with everything back to 2018. So if you're working within 2018, 2019, 2020, or 2021, those drawings are all cross-compatible with each other. And anything prior to 2018, you're going to have to save things down with proxy graphics, system variable set to 1, because those folks that are on those previous versions are going to need some assistance with proxy graphics to be able to properly see your intelligent objects saved in these newer drawing formats. And thank you, Autodesk, for making sure that we have this compatibility through so many versions consecutively. I know we all appreciate that as users. I do as a consultant, and I know that those CAD managers out there are really appreciative of that as well. We do have some additional sharing and collaboration options in 2022. I've already used this with a few clients, and I know that it's not something that I expected to be a huge win, but it really is. I'm a big fan of the eTransmit tool to make sure that all of our reference objects, all of our CTV files, PC3 files, X references, custom line types, etc., are included with the drawing file that I send to a client or that they send to me. Well, we have a new tool in Civil 3D 2022. Quite frankly, it's available to anybody on the 2022 platform for AutoCAD and any of the AutoCAD verticals such as Civil 3D, but it's the shared drawing option. The shared drawing option allows us to effectively create a link for our drawing, a web link, and set the permissions to that web link to make it either a viewable drawing on the web version of AutoCAD Online or an editable drawing that can be downloaded and modified. So we have some permissions control and management over those links that we send to folks and their ability to either view or edit those drawing files. Additionally, we have some increased checking and referencing for cloud collaboration, as you see to that far right button. We'll go through these particular tools whenever we do a live demonstration. in a few moments, but you will find these buttons on our collaboration tab within the Civil 3D ribbon interface. New alignment workflows. For those folks who especially like the connected alignment workflow, oh, you're probably going to like this a lot. We have several new alignment curve group combinations that have been added. We're talking about those curve spiral curves or spiral curve spiral type of combinations that some more options have been added into Civil 3D 2022. Connected alignments now support creating curves greater than 180 degrees. And of course, I had to put that in AutoCAD special text character formatting. 180 degrees and greater is now supported for those looped alignments that are connected between each other. That's new in 2022. Connected alignments can now be created as offsets from the parent for those slip lanes for a roundabout, or those slip lanes really for a grade separated interchange for that matter. And you can preview the solution before creating or completing the creation of that new alignment. So just like whenever we use the intersection design wizard inside of Civil 3D, and we get all those great plan view previews of where that geometry is going to be placed, the quadrant that it's that you're editing, we have those same types of previews available to us in 2022 for these previewed solutions for alignments. One really big caveat to that tool, and it's the one exception to the rule with 2022, these new alignment curve groups are not compatible with anything other than Civil 3D 2022. So if you're collaborating with somebody who's in 2021 or earlier, there is a new convert to fixed command. So you can work with those alignments however you need to work with them. If everybody in your office is using 2022, you're all going to be able to work very fluidly with each other internally. It's whenever you start to push drawings externally, if they are not on the latest and greatest version of Civil 3D, that we do have to take an extra step to simplify that alignment type. It's a very easy process. It's just a couple clicks away from the modify dropdown of the contextual ribbon with a simple button to convert those new groups to fixed. Now, this does not affect our connected alignments. It's just those new spiral curve spiral groups that didn't exist in previous versions that we have to keep this in mind for. More new features with 2022, color and diameter of compass. If you work with a single color or a predominant color in your template, you know that yellow compass layout for our pressure pipe tools can get lost if you have yellow as a dominant color in your layers. So we have the ability to modify that within our settings. The profile layout ribbon has been updated for path-based pressure networks. We have the ability both in plan and profile views to create spanning levels for pipe runs. And PVIs can now be removed and overridden for station ranges of networks. That's actually specifically within profile views, although it's not noted within the bullet point. And then if we needed to regenerate 3D solids, again, Autodesk is smart in knowing that we're not always going to use Civil 3D for everything that we do. We use other rendering tools. We may use other CAD packages for collaboration with other teams or sub-consultants. So we have a new command available to us for pressure pipe tools to regenerate the 3D solids that were created from those network parts. ArcGIS workflows, raster data has been improved. ArcGIS can now be refreshed from within ArcGIS, meaning that if you have ArcGIS data connection layers inside of Civil 3D, if you are, since it's a live connection, and if somebody's in ArcGIS desktop, they can update it from that location. It will refresh in your Map 3D, your Civil 3D environment. Resolution of each raster layer can now be configured independently. It used to be that they were all at the same resolution simultaneously as you zoomed in, zoomed out, and set those layers. But we now have independent control of those and some additional layers of resolution that can be set as you zoom in and zoom out. I know those who work with very, very large models and comprehensive GIS data appreciate the added level of detail that they can create at closer zoom levels and the more minimalized level of detail as they zoom out across those sets of resolutions. Dynamo for Civil 3D, this is an area that I've been getting pretty passionate about. Been doing a lot of research on and flexing the API calls and what we can do inside of Dynamo for Civil 3D. It used to have to be a separate install as part of Civil 3D, but now it is integrated. So when you install Civil 3D, it's not an extension, it's not a separate third program that you have to apply to download and install. It is installed with Civil 3D. So all of your users are going to have access to it. All of your users need to be aware of what to do and what not to do with Civil 3D, or sorry, with Dynamo for Civil 3D. It's a great tool to flex and leverage the comprehensive programmatic abilities of. It can and will offset some of the things that we do with Lisp, negate what we need to do, what we've historically had to use .NET and Python for, and make it much easier for us to create those comprehensive programmatic experiences inside of Civil 3D, automating many of our processes. But it now supports Python 3 as a default. So for those of us who do understand programming languages and do add some additional detail in our Python nodes within the Dynamo script, Python 3 is the default. That's important to know because the new version of this Python language, Python 3, is not compatible with the language structure of Python 2 and the variations of Python 2. Both Python 3 and Python 2 are supported, specifically 2.7, are supported in Dynamo. They can both be supported even in the same Dynamo graph and script, but you do have to specify within those Python nodes which version of Python is being utilized. And again, Python 3 is that default. So not everybody's doing programming, not everybody's using Dynamo, but for those who are, this is an important detail to keep in mind. Yeah, that basically just talked about that. The correct language must be used in each node, but both are supported. All right, now these next few features, this next couple discussion points are exclusive to those who are on the AEC collection with their licensing or those larger enterprise customers that are direct with Autodesk and our specialty accounts. So Project Explorer is one of those. Project Explorer has been around for a little bit now, but there have been some enhancements. Pressure networks, they opened up some of the API and the availability of many of those pressure network tools inside Project Explorer. Feature lines that were not or are not part of a Civil 3D site. That was actually something that was missed in the last version of Project Explorer. Independent feature lines that do not belong in a site are now supported by Project Explorer. And it's more prominently located on the home ribbon tab. I think this is a big win rather than it being something that we had to go search for maybe 6 or 7 tabs to the right of the home tab. It is prominently displayed on the home tab right next to our tool space visibility buttons. Now, again, this is exclusive to those on AEC collection and enterprise customers, but those who do that do match that criteria as far as your licensing goes. This will be an extension that can be incorporated in your download and your deployment from your account, your Autodesk account, which we won't specifically talk about during this session together, but they have dramatically improved. And I've been very fond of the new deployment creation and batch installation feature with 2022. So another key aspect for those CAD managers out there who are responsible for distributing their licensing to everybody. I think you'll be very pleased with the new structure of how that software can be packaged together in a deployment and batch processed to all of your users. The other tool that's available only to AEC collection and enterprise customers, and this is a brand new one. Those who may have been in beta testing or have seen some recent videos produced by Autodesk directly, Project Ground Force is what this used to be called during testing, but it's called grading optimization. So Project Ground Force is now grading optimization. It's only available to those on the AEC collection or enterprise. And it is an automated terrain editing process that utilizes polygonal objects. And I say that very broadly. We can use feature lines, but it can be simple polylines that represent our areas or zones, it being the specific terminology that they use within this tool, to define constraints and what parameters our grading needs to take on, including material depths, to optimize our terrain surface and minimize the amount of cut and fill and smooth the contours. We'll be talking more about that whenever we do the live demonstration. We'll do a brief preview of how to use the grading optimization tool. I'll go to next. We do have a couple new features within InfraWorks. There's an enhanced model builder. So if you use the model builder tool to access terrain and access the conversion of mapped roadways and things of that nature and buildings to be automatically generated, that is slightly cleaner and quicker in the most recent release of InfraWorks. Note that I didn't put InfraWorks 2022 in the title of this page. InfraWorks is continuously updated. It does not have a year version related to it. So always make sure that you've got the latest and greatest version of InfraWorks. And keep in mind that it doesn't necessarily have a year release name related directly to it. We also have new tools for roadway decorations. They used to be tied to the primary road, but they are now their own independent objects within InfraWorks. So they are independently edited, manipulated, and live generated. So we don't have to wait any longer for the entire InfraWorks model to regenerate to get updates to any edits that we make to those roadway decorations. There's also some new content for coverage areas to where we can have linear rows of trees or vegetation, but we can also create a stand or effectively a large area with a controllable or a variable density to those model objects within our decorations. So let's jump into a demonstration. We're about 20 minutes into our time together, and I tried to reserve as much of this as I could for looking at some of these tools. There's no way that we could get to all of them, but we're going to get to as many as we can. There we go. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to look at our connected alignment and some of the new tools that are available there. Again, we're not going to get to everything, and I apologize to that. Actually, I'm going to take one quick step back before we do the connected alignments. I did want to identify before I forgot the sharing tools. Right up next to our quick access bar, we do have a share button. Before in the slides, you saw where I went to the collaborate tab and we have the share drawing button there. But Autodesk thinks that this tool is so great and people are going to use it so frequently, they went ahead and put it next to the quick access bar. And I can't disagree with them. I think this is something that we are going to use fairly regularly. So having it prominently displayed is helpful. If this drawing was something that I wanted to share with others that I'm collaborating with, again, this would be outside your organization. This would be outside of using our Autodesk BIM collaboration, what we used to know as BIM 360. So if you're collaborating through there, great, keep doing what you're doing there. The DWG file format is now supported in BIM Collaborate Pro, and you're able to do some online web-based collaboration that way now compared to previous releases. So keep that in mind. You still have those tools available to you as well as some new features. But for those who aren't on those specific collaboration tools as a file management, project management resource, we can share a drawing. It's going to generate a link, and you'll see once it loads my options that this link will actually update depending on whether I generate this as a view-only drawing or allow somebody to edit and save a copy of this drawing. So I can simply switch it to an edit and save a copy the link, drop it in an email, drop it in Slack or Zoom chat or whatever resource you're using to communicate with your clients or collaborators, and they'll be able to open this up in the web-based version of AutoCAD. Now, note that it's including those dependencies on the drawing, and also that the link expires within 7 days. So they have a limited time frame to access this drawing and to pull it down if you've set it to an edit and save category for this, but it is going to view correctly. It's going to be fully compatible. Now, one caveat, I'm not sure how compatible all of our Civil 3D objects are through this tool yet. I have not fully tested it. Autodesk has not made a formal or a fully exhaustive statement on what all is supported, but it is the AutoCAD version of the or the web-based version of AutoCAD, not the web-based version of Civil 3D. That doesn't exist. So whether some of those elements come in as proxy graphics or whether they're just large tiles that don't represent anything at all. That's to be seen. Haven't fully vetted that yet. So there was a question that came up: is there a cost to share data on web.autocad.com site? At this time, no. So I will go into that just briefly. If you have AEC collection licensing, full licensing through Autodesk, you do get web access to AutoCAD by default. It is its own standalone. It can be purchased independently, but if you're on a paid license of AutoCAD or the AEC suite or Civil 3D, yeah, I believe the license for the web-based version comes along with that as part of the collection. That said, whenever the pandemic hit last year, Autodesk really ramped up the ability for folks to collaborate with everybody working remotely. So as of, I want to say, July of 2020, the web version of AutoCAD has been free for collaboration. Do not know how long it will be free. Do not know how long it will be publicly available. The only requirement for using it today is simply registering your email address and a password with the web.autocad.com website. Once you have a registered account, it doesn't have to be a paid one, but once you have a registered account, you can access those drawings that have been shared with you. Now, you don't get to produce drawings and share them with other folks, but you can access, view, and utilize these links to the best of your ability. And some of the new features that have been included in there, like a new trace option that just acts like tracing paper and allows you to do quick one-offs of like we would with parchment paper on old vellum plans and things of that nature. So it allows us to do some quick alternate designs over the top of our drawing space inside the web-based version. So thanks, Dan, for that question. It is an important one to realize because right now, anybody and everybody can use this tool, but for how long, I don't know. I'm hoping and crossing my fingers that it's extended for a long period of time because sometimes you're working with folks who aren't in an AutoCAD shop, and this is the quickest, easiest way to deploy or share design concepts with those folks without having to do a conversion of a drawing to a DGN or otherwise. Okay, go ahead and get out of there. I'm not going to jump into the web-based version because this is Civil 3D and InfraWorks specific today. So we do have a couple alignments in this drawing. I'm going to create a couple connected alignments to this so that we can explore some of those new those curve and spiral groups, as well as some of the other connected alignment settings. So from alignments, I'm going to create a connected alignment. The direction and order in which I select these alignments is important. So whenever I'm prompted at the command line to select my first alignment, if I am creating a ramp between this or in the second quadrant or the southeast quadrant, I will want to select the direction of traffic that I'm wanting to support. So from my south to north line to my west to east line would be my exit ramp from the south to north line to east and west. And I will pick a location within that quadrant because again, Civil 3D doesn't assume where it's creating this connected alignment. Now we get that preview area. I want to accept the current location and hit enter. And then I get to name that connected alignment. I'm just going to call this Southwest for the time being, Southwest slip. Yeah. I'm going to leave everything else really to the default on this page. It's just identifying the styles. We can talk about styles in any other webinar. Today's about features, not styles. Design criteria, again, same as what we've been used to inside of Civil 3D for a while, but parameters are where things have changed. So what is our grouping? We have some reverse spiral, curve spiral, and spiral, curve, spiral, some new groupings that just didn't exist before. I'm going to use a basic spiral, curve, spiral in this particular instance. Please note that whenever we do the conversion later, we're going to end up with 3 centered arcs. But we'll use spiral, curve, spiral. I'll define the radius. Looks fine to me. I could easily expand it though if need be, because I'm going to use, again, a slip style exit ramp. Offset in, offset out, connected overlap. We'll run with that. So there's those offsets that didn't exist before for the slip lane, just to explore some of the tools that didn't exist before. We do have, again, connected alignments that can be created or actually I'm going to reverse the direction of that in a different quadrant. We're going to go from our west to east alignment to our south to north alignment. Here, I must have clicked on a label instead. So first alignment, second alignment, picking the space, enter, and explore that one tool that didn't exist before, those greater than 180-degree curves included in the connected alignment options. Again, going to leave the defaults because this is the new feature, is as this greater than 100-degree curve in the connected alignments, with the exception of I clearly should have set my offsets in the opposing direction. Could I make those changes? Absolutely. I could also manually make those changes. I'm going to go negative 10 and just use my grip edits and some tracking to make sure that I end up with, oh, and I got to make sure that I'm opposing. So I've got my cloverleaf ramp effectively being started here. So depending on how you're creating those connected alignments, we do have some new tools in that connected alignment dialog that didn't exist before. Now, if our curve group is not the appropriate type that was supported in 2020, 2021, or 2019 for that matter, I do need to go to the contextual ribbon, go to the modify dropdown, and use this convert to fixed tool. That's what I mentioned earlier with the slides. It's going to convert that to fixed. It's no longer going to be dynamic. It will be static. Okay. And there we go. That was enough of a process to where it jogged my windows temporarily. But that is now a fixed alignment. We see that the grips have changed on it slightly. This is a necessary process though, for sharing this back out to folks on an earlier version. So as much as I like this new feature and wouldn't hesitate to use it for internal production, we do need to be cognizant of who we are collaborating with and changes that need to be made in that last step. Like anything else with these contextual ribbons, yes, you can select the entity, and yes, you can go to the modify dropdown, or we can always go to the modify tab, select the object type, and we have convert to fixed from our more static or manually create manual contextual ribbon, if you will. So I'm going to close out of there. That's really all I'm going to cover with regard to the alignments. There's a lot of new features. I'm just going to keep moving on. The one that's going to take us just a little bit to cover in more detail, because I'm not going to go into Project Explorer and heavily detail all of the separate pressure pipe tools. Project Explorer works the way Project Explorer did before. It just has access to additional object types that it did not have access to before. So we're going to jump into another drawing. This, if you've joined our demos before or our webinars before, you're probably somewhat familiar with this data set, but it just so happens that this data set works somewhat well with the new grading optimization tool, and I didn't have to recreate the wheel for some example data to show off these new tools. If you are using grading optimization, it is a separate download and install. So for those AEC and enterprise customers that have access to this tool, it does not get installed with Civil 3D. It is a separate download that you'll have to install. You can do that either directly through your AutoCAD or your Autodesk account through the web interface or through the desktop app, depending on which you have access to or your organization prefers to utilize. It is available through either of those sources for our AEC collection and enterprise clients. Okay, so what this drawing consists of right now is some very simple data. It happens to be that we are looking at polylines and this drawing. Now, whenever we use grading optimization, it's going to convert those polylines to feature lines for us, but we just have general spaces, or what grading optimization calls zones. Now, once you download and install grading optimization, it's going to be on your Analyze tab of the ribbon over here to the far right. Grading optimization, very minimalistic approach to what tools are available here. But there's another area of interest whenever we work with grading optimization. It adds a new tab to our tool palette. So if I go to my tool palettes, and technically it would open up if I automatically start the tool, but I can jump into our grading optimization tab. if I go to all palettes and start to search through. Instead of searching through, because I know we all despise that, as soon as I start to create grading objects, we see that our interface updates. So we have a grading object browser. I currently have no grading objects in my current drawing, but it also activated my tool palette to include those grading object options. So any one of these objects in the drawing, you can either pick first or you can pick the tool first. It's entirely up to you. But as we add these, we're going to start to build out basically a library of grading objects within this browser. First thing I'm going to select, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. This is our parking lot area represented by this pink line. I'm going to select that, go to my tool palette, and consider that to be a parking lot. There is specifically a zone that we can customize however we want to, but the parking lot object is just a special type of zone. So I'm going to choose parking lot. I'm going to get rid of the event viewer really quick. I know some of us love it, some of us hate it. I generally don't like it as part of demonstrations, so I'm going to go to general event viewer and set that to no. So no more pop-ups while we're working with these tools. So I've got my parking lot polyline selected. There's no depths, there's no elevations, there's no intelligence to this. I just have an existing surface and I have the horizontal representation of where my objects need to be. As a matter of fact, I do have a design surface in here that is currently shown. This is a little bit of Food Network magic, but not a whole lot. I'm going to turn that FG surface to no display, and I'm going to go back and turn my EG surface to on. That we can, in fact, see. Okay, so there's my existing surface. That's the only pieces of information that the grading optimizer is actually paying attention to. The areas that our polylines represent for those grading objects and the existing surface that it's going to be converting and calculating the earthwork against. So there's my zone that I created for that zone. There it is, max slope. I'm going to say I don't want my parking lot to be anything more than 3% and nothing less than 0.5%. I do want it to have exclusive drainage. So any drainage that's in the parking lot stays inside the parking lot, and define a material depth and what have you. So I would hit escape to deselect that item, and then the zone properties goes away. So that object that was a polyline is now a polyline with extended data tied to it. Okay, so we haven't used the grading optimizer yet. We're just assigning extended data to our polyline reference objects. So I'm going to select, oh, I didn't mean to put a window around our pink line too, but here's our objects. We can only do this to one object at a time, one limit at a time. So if I do select multiple polylines that represent the same type of material, and I set that up as a zone, it's not selecting anything until I hit escape, and then I pick back on it. It converted it to a zone, but whenever I select on it again, I'm only going to edit that one object independently of each other. So I can customize my grading controls. I can set it up with a specific grading criteria. Again, maybe within my my swale area or just my grassy right-of-way area, I can define a much greater slope, maybe 8.3% within that area, with a minimum drainage of 2%, just so we don't get ponding. So I can go through and set up all of these options within these sites. We have a building pad type. I can go to tool palettes and set up the building pad. I have a separate pond that's internal to our grading limits, but I have a pond type that I can define based off of the top of slope of this pond, and I can determine whether it's a dry pond or a wet pond. And depending on whether it's a dry pond or a wet pond, we have permanent pool settings for those wet pond parameters as well. But we can define, what our storage is. A question came up on Tuesday when Autodesk had a webinar on whether the cubic foot setting could be used as a cubic yard setting for storage volume. And at this time, that is not an option. So just to proceed or get ahead of any question related to that, right now we are limited to cubic feet for our calculation of storage, if that's a concern of anybody's. but I can set what that storage needs to be. I'll say 60,000 cubic feet with a maximum depth of 6 feet. I do have the ability to set a safety bench and to determine what those values are for the depth, as well as, freeboard and things of that nature as well. So we get some exhaustive rules that we can define for the pond itself. I'm going to say the safety bench width needs to be 3 feet wide and no more than 2 feet deep. And again, that's 2 feet below the freeboard. And then those are the properties that are set for the pond. We could go through and add curbs. We can add flow lines. Again, being conscious of time, I did preset some of that data into a separate file. No Food Network magic if I can manage, but I did not set my surfaces that I want to be displayed properly in this drawing. So I'm going to go back and set that again really quickly. Here's my existing surface. So in this particular drawing, I'm just going to describe what I did rather than define all of those settings that I used before. We have a building with a defined range of minimum and maximum finished floor elevation. This way, if it's possible to gain some benefit of the finished floor changing from the initial design to better engage and level out the entire site, we can do so. I do have we can set a sidewalk. I forgot to do that previously, but we've got coverage areas. We have drive areas, again, with different material depths and different minimum and maximum grading parameters. I also have some flow lines with some low points that were defined. So I literally just put in an AutoCAD point at the intersection of these flow lines and defined it as a low point. Setting it as a low point, defining the shape of the contours that are ultimately going to be produced off of here, and the angle of that shape allows me to control how my contours are actually developed around those low points within a parking lot or within a ditch for that matter, as well as those same parameters that I was showing you before with regard to the pond. So a lot we could talk about this. Easily an entire hour could be dedicated to just the grading optimizer, but the key point is you're defining zones with grading criteria, zones within those, the entire limit of the grading, and then your specific features like your flow line, your low points, and maybe building pads and things of that nature. Once you are set with the zones that you think you need, and it may change, but the zones that you think you need within that same Analyze tab, we'll go to Optimize. We'll be prompted to select the existing grade surface that we are comparing against, and the Grading Optimize window comes up on our screen. So within grading optimization, again, we started out with an existing surface and plan view flat polyline geometry. We get kind of a preview of the different material depths and object types within our grading optimization window here. So we're identifying where a pond will be, a building pad will be, a parking lot, the drive, just the overall kind of site stripping area for our sod work and our low points. That's what we see. They're not CAD objects, they're visualizations of model entities. Now, we can start to optimize at any point in time. And as we optimize, it's going to retriangulate and reprocess everything. And it's going to continue to work and work and work depending on what your CPU and GPU and your RAM and hard drive are all capable of is going to determine how fast it can optimize this surface. I'm going to turn on our visual modes to where we can see where our cuts and fills are, our clashes. So these are the red triangles represent the areas of our model that do not yet conform to the parameters that we defined. I can set it to none and we can just visually see how the contours are changing as Optimizer is running. And while you can't probably hear it on your side, this is utilizing a considerable amount of hardware resources, as you might imagine. There are millions of calculations running simultaneously right now to produce this optimization. But if you are leaving for lunch or leaving for the evening, it would be an ideal time to set this up and let it run for a little bit while you're gone. It can be quick. You can stop at any point in time. And if you're satisfied with the results, it will allow us to send that optimized result at whatever state it's in back to Civil 3D as our, quote unquote, complete framework of feature lines. Now, we have another tool that we can use. Well, actually, we can use several other visualization tools to see how this impacts our topology and our cut and fill and hydrology. But the one thing aside from visualization that I want you to key in on is our ability to select items that we don't think are adhering to rules. In this case, the building pad. And the controls in here are very familiar for those who are using InfraWorks. So think InfraWorks controls when working in grading optimization. Our building pad is not level with the surrounding ground surface. I can change that in here to ensure that it is aligned with my surface. So we have some custom controls that we can apply to allow this to update those new rules. Okay, so we do have the ability to make some minor edits to the rules that are applied to these grading elements, but it's going to continue to run. And if you want to know how efficient your surface is compared to what you might be trying to do independent of grading optimization, we have convergent plots. So we can see how the overall smoothness, volume, and feasibility of a project is changing over the course of this calculation. The simpler the site, the quicker these calculations run, but also the simpler the site, the easier it probably is for you to make those changes independent of this tool. So this tool really could be leveraged to great effect on larger sites with multiple components that add a lot of complexity to the incremental changes that you would otherwise have to manually make. Maybe you have 10 building pads, 3 different zones of parking lot, curb and gutter, ADA ramps. We can account for sidewalks and things of that nature, which I did not do in my kind of pre-baked drawing for the sake of time. But at any point in time, I can say stop. It's optimized enough for me. Send optimized result back to Civil 3D. And I have the option of creating a new surface. I'm just gonna call it new from optimization. Define the style that's being used in Civil 3D for that new one. It's probably not going to be pretty because I stopped it fairly early. Let me change to a smaller one. I'm just going to go with 0.2 and 1. It's probably not going to look pretty with such small contours, but I am going to add the feature lines back in. We don't have to. It can just be a surface by itself, but I'm going to add the feature lines that were created by grading optimization back into Civil 3D, because the benefit is once those feature lines are back in to Civil 3D, they're available in Civil 3D, and we can manually tweak and edit them to our heart's content once they're back in. So we're going to get a new proposed surface. Again, whether it's pretty or not, I can't validate live without having let grading optimization run to the full extent, but it is a nice tool. It is processing in the background, and it is adding in those feature lines. I may let it run for just a quick second. My fan is still going like a jet in the background right now, whether or not you can hear it. But I'm going to let that run for another moment before we switch over to InfraWorks to close out for the day. Again, there are some more features that I couldn't have possibly covered inside the new tools in Civil 3D. So right off the bat, I know that my low points have not been optimized yet to converge on where my actual low point of the surface is yet. Our contouring is not as complete as I'd like it to be, okay? So we've got some more tools, and actually I never set a grading limit. So it graded for the entire existing surface. And of course, the proposed contours match the existing contours where I did not define any grading criteria. So 2 steps that I should have taken before jumping into grading optimization. One was adding in my sidewalk. Another was making sure I had a grading limit. Again, that was one of the tools that we had available in here, grading limit, but I did not define beforehand. And then I could have let grading optimization run for a while longer in the background. Again, the more complex and the larger the drawing, and depending on the limitations of your hardware, this is not a cloud service. This is using your computer's hardware, will determine how long the optimization actually runs to completion. But again, at any point in time, you can stop it, bring the model data back into Civil 3D, select those feature lines, and modify them to your heart's content. It is just a Civil 3D feature line that we have full control over after it's been inserted back in. Jennifer asked the question, does it eventually stop running when it thinks it's complete? Yes, there is a point of completion. I will say that I let this run on a different example yesterday evening for about 3 hours and it wasn't done yet. It was a similar size area, but even after 3 hours, it wasn't done. That's where I say walk away for lunch or leave it running whenever you are done for the day at work. Save it before you leave because like anything else, system-wise, server-wise, otherwise, your best bet is to always save your drawing before you walk away for an extended period of time. But let it run for a few hours. The longer you let it run, the more ideal the design is going to be. It may look funky from time to time. You may get random spikes as it's calculating all variables, but it will always resolve those and flatten out the earthwork to a more realistic and highly advantageous design as far as the earthwork balances and where the earthwork's moving from. It's not just overall cut and fill, it's mass haul. Where's the earth coming from and moving to minimize the overall cost of construction. Okay, so we do have that proposed surface in here. That's the extent of what I was planning on showing with these tools in Civil 3D today. Be happy to answer any questions that you have as we move forward, but we're nearing 10 minutes or so left of our kind of programmed time together. So I'm jumping over into InfraWorks. This is just a general highway in northern Indiana, let's call it that. If you're familiar with our region in the state, you might start to pick up on where this is in the world, but that's okay. It's a generic interchange, and that's all we really care about. And it really could be an urban street. It could be a ditch for all I care. We can use some new tools in InfraWorks that were previously unavailable to us and work, in my opinion, much better than what was previously available to us. The first thing, and I mentioned this in the slides, is our roadway decorations. So first things first, this came from a model. So I let InfraWorks develop this model. And that means that all my roads in here are modeled roads. They are not component roads. So the tools that I'm talking about with relationship to roadway decorations does require that our road itself is converted to a component road. So I'm going to select my road, right click, and convert it to a component road. I'm always going to get the warning that it basically changes how the entire database structures the component road compared to where it was before. Also, whenever we remove it from the model, we do sometimes have to make vertical adjustments to our modeled objects to realign them with some of the modeled geometry that came from our project model. So a couple caveats there whenever we switch to a component road, but oftentimes we're using these tools for design roads anyway. They're already component roads, whether you're designing them from scratch inside of InfraWorks or they're a connected model coming from Civil 3D. In either case though, now that it's a component road, regardless of how it became a component road, we have the ability to add in roadway decorations as an independent object now. So if I right click, I have place decorations. Place decorations allows a selection of a fairly large library of available ones. It's limited right now because whenever I was trialing this the last time a few days ago, I looked at rail. But maybe it's some kind of a guard rail or divider or concrete structure that you're trying to place along the edge. I'm just going to use a kind of a common 3-rail guard. And you're going to be prompted for what linear location of your road is this guardrail actually going to be placed. I'm going to place it to the outside edge of my shoulder. It's going to run along the entire length of this component road. It does recognize that you do have intersections, so that is one added benefit. It will recognize some obstructions at those on and off ramps, as we can see here. So if you did have a guardrail that needed to run the full extent of the alignment, you can probably just leave it at the defaults, but we do have stationing control. I can physically shift the limits of this guardrail and that object update independent inside the components. Let's pivot around a little bit. Because they're independent objects, we can independently control the spacing. So this tri guardrail I can change the spacing out. I think this is going to be somewhere around 10 feet, maybe even a little bit tighter. 10 feet is good enough, even if there's just a slight overlap, maybe 13. That looks pretty good. You'll note that it doesn't really have a clean transition from each instance. I can change to a tilting mode. Tilting mode will heal any vertical difference in here. Note that the change hasn't happened yet. I was given a tip. It just went away, but I was given a tip at the bottom of my screen that if I just click away or hit escape, that model component is going to rebuild. So previously, whenever we did roadway decorations, it required us to regenerate the entire roadway that that decoration was based off of. Now it's live. It updates automatically just by clicking away in the screen. Now, if our guardrail is too tight to the shoulder, we still have those independent offsets and spacing to where we can change where it's located along the seam. And just like anything else in InfraWorks, I can quickly repeat this on the other side of the road or the adjacent road on the other side of the divided highway for that matter. So that's some of the neat functionality that came along with this latest version of InfraWorks. The one thing I will say is if I created this decoration on the other side, and I got to make sure I actually pick the roadway alignment entity for placing decorations, is I may be placed backwards. Yeah, that's what I was expecting, is that roadway decoration component for that guardrail is backwards. I can change the rotation of it 180 degrees, and it's effectively the same settings as I used before. Change my spacing, allow for tilting for a clean transition between all of those along the vertical change within the drawing. And now we have guardrails on both sides of the road. So decorations greatly enhanced in recent versions. What about those highway departments, or for that matter, park departments who want to see a lot of vegetation in our open spaces now? We know the benefits of infiltration. We know the benefits of trees in open spaces and their benefits to the environment and people and behavior and slowing down traffic in places along roadways. So we have some components that we can create from our environment dropdown on the create tab of InfraWorks now. We can create rows of trees. That's not entirely different than what we were used to before. I just searched to filter down the types of trees that I am placing. Again, this is just the default library, nothing special about this, but I could place a row of trees along the ditch line, hit enter, and develop my row of trees if I wanted to. Instead of a row of trees though, because that's not entirely different than what we had before, I want to place a stand of trees. So I'm going to place just a stand of beech trees into what would otherwise be considered more of a coverage area at the general low point of this interchange, and hit enter whenever I'm done. There we go, double click. There's my stand of trees. I can obviously change some of the tag data, but one of the less obvious aspects of this is whenever we hit escape, this is all one object. Notice the bounding box for the entire stand of trees. We can move it, we can manipulate it, but the entire bounding box can be changed to the level of density that we want that set of trees to be displayed. So again, it's the entire object itself that is a stand of trees. It becomes a little bit more difficult to select after the fact. There we go. And I can adjust my density down. So we have that new feature. It doesn't have to be trees. It could be different types of vegetation that you have in wherever you're at in the world. You know, scrubby grass, dandelions. It could just be a tall stand of weeds for that matter. But any model entity that we have in our decorations for environmental placement can be added to a new stand. So that's a new feature within InfraWorks besides the decorations for the roadway and how they're independently controlled, as well as the enhanced model builder tools. Again, an hour is a tight amount of time to talk about all these new features, and we didn't even cover but just that one new share feature for AutoCAD. there's a lot of new features inside of AutoCAD that I think are valid justifications for moving to 2022 releases. I know there's hesitation to jump into the brand new release as soon as it's available, but I would encourage you to start testing out. I think you're going to find some value, especially with the new count command and a new count palette that allows us to do much quicker object object quantity correction and tabular editing. There's a new field type for our counted objects that can be embedded in tables. It doesn't necessarily replace everything that we do in Civil 3D. Civil 3D is great, but I encourage you to explore some of the new features that are in just regular vanilla AutoCAD as well. So that said, that's it for the demonstration today. I encourage you to ask any questions that you may have. We've got a few minutes left for our programmed time together for the webinar, and I'll give it just a quick minute to see if any additional Q&A comes through. Let's see. Or if you happen to use the chat feature too. I answered that line. All right. Another minute or two. Jennifer, thanks for your participation. Dan, thanks for your question. If nobody else has any, then I'm going to go ahead and finish out the demonstration by saying thanks for your time. I appreciate you joining us today. Your hour is my hour, and it's very appreciated that you spent it with me. I'm glad that you're able to glean something for this and maybe provide some practical application to the work that you do. And if you want more content like this, if you want to see more free webinars, blogs, and white papers, please follow ATG on our LinkedIn page or our YouTube channel. At least weekly, we produce some content that we make available to our clients and just to the general public to improve the ways that you work with this software that we all know and love and sometimes lovingly hate to use. And how you can maybe learn to love it a little bit more. Again, thank you for your time. Appreciate your attention today and deciding to dedicate an hour of your time to me and what I had to share with you. I look forward to seeing you again at a future webinar. If you'd like to reach out to me directly, there's my email address. And please, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to reach out at any point in time. And until the next time, take care and see you next.